the stories, the journey, the wild behind the scenes, and much more. I'm Dave Anthony, and I'm the host of From Garage to Stadiums.
And I want to get into something that is a little bit obviously controversial here. The 80s start rolling out, and I guess there's a couple things that go on. One is there some growing homophobia in the US about Freddie?
Well, I think what it was that in America they were perceived as being a rock band, and a rock band by the early 80s is a band that looks like, say, Van Halen. I'm using that as an example. Dave Lee Roth. Not that there's any, that's the campest thing ever, and I love that early Van Halen, but people have a different perception. So Freddie Mercury's short hair, very short hair and a moustache, that was what was called the clone look. That was the look that was popular in the gay clubs at that time. So he's effectively hiding in plain sight. But American audiences, your radio formats and how things work, it's very regimented. Rock, seen as rock. Suddenly you've got this band and the lead singer's got short hair and a moustache and they're doing disco records. So it's harder to fit into the formula. I think in the UK we were a little easier with it, but I know again from interviewing the band that it started to become very hard for them in America, particularly on that tour, 1982, the Hot Space tour. Their support act was a guy called Billy Squire. Now, Billy had hits. He never had hits in the UK. Billy never had hits in the UK. I know who he is and I've heard his music. But on that tour, he was going over better than Queen because he was having the bigger hits. So they're suddenly in this very insecure position.
Billy Squire, The Stroke.
The Stroke, yeah. The Stroke and the Big Beat and that stuff. He never did anything here. I think he did tour here because I did see him. Mm-hmm. But it was different. Queen was struggling. I don't know that it was outright homophobia, but it's more, where does this fit in? Why is this rock? Why has this guy got a moustache, and why is he doing disco records?
Right. And I guess it solidifies when they release the works. They've got, some good tunes though. Radio Gaga, Hammer to Fall, which is a heavy tune.
That's a great old rock song, isn't it?
But one of the other cuts is I Want to Break Free, which produces a video of controversy or controversy, as you folks would say.
That's right. MTV wouldn't play that video. In the UK, the video itself is great. And here in the UK, everybody absolutely loved it because it's spoofing a TV soap opera here called Coronation Street, which has been on air since before I was born. And it's totally in the national consciousness. Everybody knows what that is. And in the UK, you've had a great tradition in comedies going back years of guys dressing as women for comic effect. The idea of that scene with Freddie Mercury dressed as a woman, but he's still got the moustache, pushing a vacuum cleaner around the house, that was just a golden comedy moment in the UK. But in America, it did not go over well. They showed that they took that video into MTV and MTV went, no, we are not playing this. And, all the points of reference are too British. It's too British for American audiences. I don't know that it's necessarily about the dressing as women, but maybe I'm sure that didn't help. But
all the members are dressed as women.
All the members you're not going to get Van Halen dressed as women. Even though Dave Lee Roth would have made a great woman. But the point is that heavy metal, heavy rock was more macho. Even if by being macho, it's incredibly camp. It kind of does a full circle. But it's the perception. And that killed their career stone dead in the States. They didn't tour. That album. Freddie Mercury refused to go back to America. And that's when, everything they did was then became concentrated in the UK and Europe.
Was it a rumor that who knows? You read things on the internet, but was it a rumor that razor blades and stuff were thrown on stage?
There was a story that razor blades were thrown on stage to shave the moustache. That was earlier on when he first grew the moustache. Yeah, right. I think around 1980, there was a story that people were throwing disposable razors on stage
because the moustache just became part of the look, I guess, around 80 to 82.
Yeah, the moustache was a huge thing, but again, this was Freddie expressing his kind of sexuality, and again hiding in plain sight. I just think it's funny,
Yeah.
it's
We
very
had Peter Ames Carlin on, and he wrote a book on REM, and he talked about the very clunky transition from the 70s to the 80s that spawned REM.
Mm.
And he said, he felt a lot of the disco new wave backlash was homophobia in the end. It was like, disco sucks and all this kind of stuff was really, there was a lot of kind of, male machoism against that.
Yeah, I think there was, and also probably a little bit of racism as well, wasn't there? When you had the whole
Racism he mentioned as well.
the Disco Sucks campaign, where there was that particular radio DJ who encouraged people to go to a sports stadium and burn Village People records, or a lot of it was basically just R&B and black, records. It was it's a crazy campaign. It really is. I mean, I remember seeing. I'm because I'm so ancient. I remember seeing Disco Sucks badges on sale here in the UK, and you.
Oh yeah, I remember that too.
So it's
yeah. And I mean, that extended even into the 80s with, we don't play any rap on this station.
Yeah, that's it, because it's very formatted, wasn't it? The radio was very formatted,
Tell me about this South Africa 1984. What were these guys thinking?
Well, money is what they were thinking, Dave. They got offered a massive amount of money to go and play in Sun City, which they'd been sort of conned into believing was this sort of oasis within South Africa where apartheid didn't apply. And of course, it wasn't the case. As much as anything, it was a kind of financial apartheid. Everybody working there, emptying the dustbins, taking the trash out, serving the drinks, was black. And the only people that had any kind of money to be able to afford tickets for the shows were white. So it was they went against a musicians union boycott, as it must be said did others, including Rod Stewart, Aretha Franklin, and Stevie Wonder, all played Sun City a very small. But Queen definitely caught they really caught the ire of the musicians union, and in hindsight, it was a massive mistake. Brian May, to his credit, went out and really tried to defend why he'd done it, and said they'd gone out to townships, they'd given money to various good causes out there. But the point is, it was a misstep, and they paid the price for it. What's interesting is that, of course, Freddie Mercury, the only non-white member of Queen, he never left the hotel complex the entire time he was there, and he had to cancel several shows because his voice had gone. So he never commented on any of this. It was left to sort of Roger Taylor and Brian May to sort of desperately try and defend the decision to play, but they got offered a huge amount of money to do it.